The Heart of Mediation with Dr. Barbara Sunderland Manoussso, part of the series Titans of Mediations with seasoned mediator and trainer Dr. Barbara Sunderland Manoussso. That is our topic for today. Welcome to the Lawyers and Mediators International Show and Podcast by InstantMediations.com, where we discuss law and conflict resolution topics to educate both professionals and everyday people. Catch regular episodes on YouTube, the Instant Mediations app, and anywhere you get your podcasts. Just remember, nothing in these episodes constitutes legal advice, so be sure to talk to a lawyer, as cases are fact-dependent. Hi, everyone. This is Mac Pierre-Louis, attorney, mediator, and arbitrator, working throughout Florida and Texas.
And Natalia Łowska-Czajka, advocate mediator from Warsaw, Poland.
And I'm Dr. Barbara Sunderland Manoussso, a trainer, practitioner, and the co-host of my Manousso Musing. And today I will be the interviewee and my co-host will interview me. So I'm delighted that we're going to talk about the heart of mediation.
Yes. Thank you so much, Dr. Manoussso. So this is a little different than the usual ones we do, where Dr. Manoussso has a lot of great guests who come on and talk about conflict resolution topics. And we've had people from all walks of life, lots of different academics and practitioners. So we always appreciate you when you bring in all the people that you know and who you've worked with over the years. But wanted to take a minute and talk to you a little bit about a chapter that you wrote called The Heart of Mediation in a book that I'm going to screen share and give me about 10 seconds. And while I'm sharing this book, just know a little bit about this with regards to Dr. Manoussso. She has 30 years of experience mediating and training mediators. Okay, that's 30 years. And
Yes.
so she basically knows it all and is a walking book herself. And so she's a PhD, all the accolades. We've interviewed you many times before. And so you know your stuff. And I'm saying that because she took time and contributed a chapter in this book, specifically chapter 16, and the Gruder's Handbook of Organizational Conflict Management. And that's edited by Lavana Wilkin and Yashwant Pathak. Now, Dr. Lavana Wilkin was a prior guest on Dr. Manousso's series, but I actually didn't know that Dr. Manousso herself had contributed a chapter to this book. So that's why we're coming back and having her talk a little bit about what the heart of mediation is. And with that, Dr. Manousso, please talk a little bit about yourself with regards to why you chose to be a guest contributor in this book. Oh, and one more thing before I start. If you're listening to this podcast, please check out the video version, the YouTube version, so you can see what we're sharing on the screen, which is the book, The Gruder Handbook of Organizational Conflict Management. And one last thing, check out Dr. Manousso's website, manousso.us. That's where you can get access to all of her information. That's manousso.us. All right, take it away, doctor.
Well, thank you very much. I'm happy to be on this side of the interview today. And speaking to the point, which I was happy to contribute in this handbook, the heart of mediation. And I'm spelling the word heart with a capital H, small E-A-R, and a capital T. And the concept is the capital H and the capital T are framing two important aspects of mediation. The hearing, we hope the parties hear and are heard. And of course, the ear is how you're going to hear or be heard. And so this is something that is often being lost in the mediation world. And mediation's still kind of a new industry. The 70s, it started to be a profession by itself. And in the 80s, it started to be codified. Texas was one of the leaders in codifying and putting it into the statutes so that there was a structure and an expectation of what a mediator should know and how they should be the shepherds of the process. So that's why the heart of mediation is in the center of this handbook, and it also is at the heart of what the expectation of the process should be.
And we're particularly delighted to have you with us as our interviewee because of the fact that we're both also the graduates from your training, and we enjoyed that very much. And Mac did his before the pandemic. I did mine within the pandemic, which meant that it was all online with no loss to the content, to the pace of it all. And I'm even more delighted to have this conversation at the dawn of the International Mediation Day, which falls on the 20th of October. So not a better time to talk about mediation. And now, knowing why the heart is being spelled in a different way, please tell us what the heart of mediation is.
Well, when mediation began, it was a vehicle that was used basically by retired judges because it was under the bailiwick. Somebody would have a lawsuit, they would take it to court, and the court would say, well, a conversation and an opportunity for you to be the ones who find a solution, speaking to the parties, made a lot of sense. So very often the mediator would be a judge. And as it evolved, not only judges, it was more attorneys. Now we're in the, 40 years after it was pretty much codified or set in statute or became recognized as an industry. It's all people, mediators are from all walks of life. But sometimes the legal profession has a tendency to want to take ownership. And I don't want to slam attorneys because they are extremely beneficial and necessary and a very important part of the mediation process. But the mediation process will be lost if it is being run for the dollar, not for the content and for the concept that it initially was proposed to be, and how the ethical standards, whether it's through the American Bar Association or state bars, set forth expectations of how the process should be used or delivered. And that's not always what's been happening. And as people try to be creative, they sometimes are moving away from the intent of what mediation is supposed to be doing. So that is a little bit of the concept. Did it answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
And so, how have you seen? Well, you described a little bit about how mediation's evolved, but how have you seen that mediation has changed over the years for the better and for the worse with regards to what the heart of mediation is all about?
Well, the heart of mediation, again, the concept is that the parties have an opportunity to speak with each other, that they have a chance to be heard and to hear what the other side is saying. And so many times in mediation, whether it's family, civil, it doesn't matter what the genre is. The concept and the process is pretty similar. It has some variation to accommodate the content, but overall, the concept is that the parties are given an opportunity to hear people yell at each other because they don't feel that they've been heard. So they bring up their volume. And if people also are feeling that they are dismissed, or they're not clever enough to make their own solutions, that also takes away from empowering them. And what's been happening sometimes in the mediation world, as I alluded a little before, attorneys sometimes try to take ownership for a process, and they'll hybrid it or try to short circuit it. The parties might come to a mediation. They're paying for a mediation. The court has told them they have to go to mediation. So they go to mediation, and the attorneys will say, well, where's my room? So they want to go to a separate room with their client, and that's it. So they want to do a 100% caucus style mediation where the mediator runs between the rooms. This is actually only negotiated settlement. It's not what mediation was intended for. And I've heard attorneys say, well, my party can't, my client can't talk to the other side. They argue. Well, yes, that's why they're in mediation. If they could talk to each other, they would have resolved it, but they can't. But a good mediator, the strength of a good mediator is that they personally are not afraid of conflict. They are not afraid of the parties screaming at each other if they need to. But the mediator also has the skill set to be able to help the parties use communication skills with each other. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've been in a mediation, and each side, each party will say what's brought them to the mediation and what they were hoping to get out of it. And it doesn't even sound like they're in the same dispute. They both have seen the dispute so differently that it's radically odd that no wonder they can't find a common ground, because they haven't been in the common ground. But the parties this could never be discovered or could never be worked through if the parties were only in separate rooms and somebody's running between the rooms, just bringing numbers or bringing a message to each other. But the semblance of the message is lost because they're not hearing it from the other side. They're not in the same reality. And so this is where the heart of mediation is that the parties need to be in the same space. They need to say what's brought them to their mediation, what they're hoping to get out of it. And while they tell the mediator this, the other party can, of course, hear it. And so we've taken this to a new level now because for almost 30 years, we always did it in physical space. And now we're doing mediation on Zoom a good portion of the time. And so the threat that the attorneys would bring to the mediation that, oh, my party's so inflamed and they argue so much, we can't have them in the same room as an excuse, this no longer is valid because there is no physical threat to any of the parties. Everybody is in the same space. So that's, again, where we go back to the heart of it. We've kind of gone full circle where people started off in a good place, where people were listening and were hearing and were complying with a process that empowered them, and there was recognition of what they were feeling, and they were getting in a reality. And then it was taken away from them a little bit by attorneys sometimes who wanted to only put people in separate rooms so that they were the ones empowered. It shouldn't be about the mediator. They're not the one that should be empowered. It should be the parties. And so by the mediator running between rooms, that took the punch, that took the process, that took the heart out of what mediation should look like. And so now that we have Zoom, we're kind of taking it full circle, because that argument that, oh, my parties can't be in the same physical space because they'll kill each other. They won't. And well, sometimes we do worry a bit more now. People are a little crazier, but it takes so we're coming back around to full circle. So that's why I thought the chapter was so important, and it's on my website as well. So if anybody wants to read just the chapter, I hope they read the whole book, but they can read just the chapter.
Yeah, and if I may, real quick, I do have Dr. Manousso's website up. That's manousso.us. You can check it out, and has lots of very important information. And so, just wanted to let you know, in case you're listening, check out the YouTube version so you can see the screen share, manousso.us. Okay, Natalia?
And if anybody wants to learn some mediation skills and learn what makes the heart of it, we have our next training in January of 2023 already. So that's an opportunity.
Yeah, that's all
And
on
it's
your website as
online.
well.
And it's
And that's on,
online,
it's
which
yeah.
I understand, and that was the benefit I could take it. I could take from it, which was I could do the training staying in Poland and learning mediation the Texan way from the titan of mediation, Dr. Barbara Manousso. But back to the chapter and to this end essence, I think that many people, when being asked what is mediation about, they'll also give the definition, which is like a conversation before a third party neutral, uh, powered by the guarantees of the process, neutrality, the confidentiality. So I do believe that when people think about mediation, they think that those guarantees are the heart of the mediation. And tell us why it is wrong to look at the mediation, at the heart of the mediation, this way.
Well, I don't think you're really wrong, and that's a very good point that you just brought out. People will sometimes say, "Oh, I mediate." Well, they might informally mediate, and probably what they're really doing is facilitating a conversation, which is perfectly fine. And that happens a lot. But what you're looking for, a formal mediation, and parties sometimes don't realize they have the initiative that they can actually be the ones that select their own mediator, too. Even if they're represented by attorneys, they can still be the ones that actually pick somebody they can feel comfortable with who will be a third party neutral. But a mediation process is starting with the agreement to mediate and a confidentiality agreement. You don't want to read on Facebook a couple of days later that your party that you were arguing with posts some of your talking points. And so that would be a breach of contract, and that would be a legal issue that would have to be dealt with. So a mediation is by a trained mediator, and it's 40 hours of specific training to be a mediator. And that's pretty much the gold standard. Most of the world is 40 hours. And that started in Texas, by the way. That 40 hours that was established was Judge Frank Evans was the one who used and provided that framework, which most of the world recognizes as the gold standard. And then the parties both sign, or all, it could be more than two, sign this agreement to mediate and confidentiality, that anything that happens in that mediation stays in the mediation. You might need to talk about your boss. You might need to talk about somebody that's close to everybody. And you don't want that going back to them. You don't want to even mediate if you're in a workplace at the workplace. You want to do something away so that people can't listen, they can't hear. Everything's got to be confidential, and that you're agreeing to mediate, that you have good faith in your heart. You're not just going to sit there and gather information. You're going to actively want to participate in finding a solution. So we go back to hearing, and we go back to listening. And sometimes when I start a mediation, I don't ask the parties who wants to speak first. I ask, who wants to listen first? And that always takes them by, you can see everybody kind of gasp and go, listen? Yes, we want you to listen. So the first part of a mediation, the parties tell the mediator what's brought them to the conversation. They don't tell the other party, they tell the mediator, because it diffuses somewhat, but the other party can hear. So that's the beginning of it. And the end of the mediation is a mediated settlement agreement. It's a binding contract. It's the blueprint. It's the means to the end. It's how, the who, what, when, and where, and if not, what not will happen if you don't follow the plan that's designed by the parties involved. And it's their plan, so they can make it work for them, and they know how to bring it forward. So that's a real mediation. It's not just a conversation. It's not a tit for tat. It's not throwing mud on each other. Mediation, the heart of mediation, is where everybody gets to speak, and the mediator makes sure that the table feels balanced and everybody is heard and everybody gets the opportunity to be heard. And so that's very important, that people realize it's a very heady role for the mediator, and mediators need to have skill. They need to keep their skills up, and they are the shepherds of the process. So it's not, it's a very important role.
Dr. Manoussso, before we go, a couple of questions. One, you just mentioned that mediators need to keep their skills up. In the state of Texas, for example, where you work primarily, where you train primarily, even though you've been training all around the world, in the state of Texas, there's not necessarily a required MCLE course for mediators, like in other states, like Florida, for example. What are your thoughts on that? Because, I mean, people can only get better over time, especially with good training. But do you think that this is something that actually hurts the profession without having the required MCLE hours?
Well, not everybody might want to be a mediator. And so, you're looking at attorneys as well as non-attorneys. We get a lot of teachers, human resource people, licensed professional counselors, a lot of medical doctors, almost every class. We get a lot of clergy, imams, rabbis, pastors. They run across the board. So anybody can be a mediator, number one. So just MCLE would make it more lawyer-centric, and it's not. But in Texas, we have the Texas Credentialing Association. And the Texas Credentialing Association has minimal standards for training, doing mediation, keeping up with mediation skills. And they have a conference once a year so that you would keep up to your 15 credits in MCLE to be listed on their bench book, which goes to the courts all over Texas. And the judges, once upon a time, it was in the statute. Now, I haven't seen it lately in the statute. Stuff shows up in statute, stuff disappears magically sometimes. But back in the day when they started the Texas Credentialing Association, the mediators who were on that list, and you could be a non-attorney as well as an attorney, it didn't have anything to do with your legal background, that as long the judges, if you were court appointed, they were only supposed to pick from this bench book that they received from the Texas Credentialing Association. So that is, in that sense, it is required. And to mediate, you are supposed to be a mediator. So so that's what I find at the heart of mediation. And I do hope that people have an opportunity to check out our website, check out our trainings, and read the chapter, and then buy the rest of the book and read the rest of it. So thank you for giving me an opportunity to talk about the heart of mediation. and I look forward to some other Manoussso Musing interviews as we go forward, wrapping up this year and going into 2023. Thank you both for today. I appreciate being the interviewee.
Thank you.